go right now. So me Cardinal is our way to go right now. Where they're yeah, that, yeah. It's so safe. One of the hottest teams in baseball. The Dodgers are the only team that can wait to be hotter since the All-Star break.
Okay, the YouTube is live. You will need to unmute when you're ready to start.
Right. So welcome everybody to this August 30th, 2022 meeting of the Binder Park Golf Course Operations Review Committee. This is a meeting that we hold annually to just get an update on golf course operations. This committee was established by the commission, I'm going to say, Mark, maybe 4 or 5 years, probably 5 years ago now or so. It
was a good move, by the way.
Yeah, and it's given us an opportunity to check in with Ron and Deska at the end of each fiscal year on golf course operations to see how we're doing overall. Part of the work of this committee ultimately ended up in the golf course being rolled into the recreation budget, which was a big change that we made, whereas we used to treat the golf course separately. So I'll call the meeting to order, see if we have any public comment. And that we don't have anybody else in the room for public comment, so we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We've got minutes from August 17th of 2021 that were included in your packet. Are there any questions or comments, changes needed for the minutes?
No, but I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Motion from the mayor, support. Support from Ron. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved and we'll move on to our operations update. We'll start with a financial review, and in your packet, I apologize, it's a little bit small when it gets printed on a 4.5 or by 8.5 and 11 feet of paper. But this is actually the fourth page of your packet. This is the projection that we have been using since the committee was formed. It projects the golf course out through 2035. There's nothing magical about that specific number. But what you can see is it shows the debt payments through the point at which the debt is retired in fiscal year 25. And then it just gives you a projection over the next 10 years of what golf course operations could generate in terms of revenue over expenses once the debt is paid off. So you can see any particular given year by looking at the fiscal year identified up above. So what we have in this particular report is the projected year end for fiscal year 22, which ends on June 30th. And that's the box that you see that's outlined. The column that you see is outlined as fiscal year 22. Now that's our projection for year end 22. So these are not audited numbers at this point, but I don't expect that during the audit process, a lot would change for the golf course. So these are probably fairly realistic numbers. And then in the next column, you can see we've got the budget for fiscal year 23. So Ron will talk about a little bit of this, I think, when he gets to his report, but just a couple things to note here. Once again, you can see Ron from a revenue point of view had a really good year, one of the best years. And if you can look over the last, say 5 or 6 years, which are shown on this projection, you can see it was one of the better years. Not quite what you did last year, but still a pretty robust year. And you can see that operating revenue over operating expense, and operating expenses, when you go under the expense line and look at total operating expense, that $1,114,000, those are Ron's operating expense, and below that is the debt payment. So you can see revenues, operating revenues over operating expenses were almost $130,000. And so if you go to the bottom of the square there, it's a little bit hard to read here. But that 129,596, I think it is the amount of revenue over expense on the operating side that then gets contributed to the debt payment. And so you can see we've calculated a percentage there. So in other words, Ron generated enough additional revenue to cover his operating expenses and about 55% of the debt payment. And you can see the prior year, revenues over expenses were almost $400,000. So 100% of the debt payment was absorbed in fiscal year 21. Excuse me, 20, that's fiscal year 20, and in 21, 55% was absorbed. So, or 22, excuse me. So basically what we're saying is the golf course continues to cover all of its operating expenses with revenue and contributes a significant portion against the debt. And over the last 2 years, if you combine Ron's revenue over expenses, you can see that that's more than covered the debt for the last couple of years. So congratulations, Ron.
Thank you.
Obviously, that's awesome. As you can see in the projection here too, there are 3 more years of debt payment left up to fiscal year 25. Yeah. And so that is a magical year. So for example, if you look at this year, you could say if Ron didn't have a debt payment, then the golf course would have generated almost $130,000 in additional revenue for the Parks and Recreation Department. So one thing I would say about that going forward is that the way that the property was deeded to the city of Battle Creek, some of the revenue generated on the, I guess what I'll call the old course, needs to stay with the golf course, right? So any revenue generated on that property has to be reinvested in the course. Any revenue generated anywhere else on the golf course, which of course your new clubhouse, your driving range, your practice holes, and a chunk of, I can't remember what we call the new 9.
Oh,
What
the
would that be?
natural.
The natural.
Yeah.
And a chunk of the natural are on property that was bought additionally to the original property that was deeded for the course, right? So revenue generated there can just be used in general by the recreation department. So you can see that both the golf course will benefit because money will be reinvested and the recreation department will benefit as soon as we get to the end of that debt payment. I think, Mark, you may recall the commission wisely decided back when we formed this committee not to try to restructure any of that debt, to say, hey, let's just stay on schedule and get that debt paid off by the end of 2025. And then the golf course will really be, a money-making machine. It'll certainly contribute positively to the overall recreation department finances. So great job again, Ron. That's our fiscal 22 review. You can see the budget for fiscal 23 is much more conservative than what Ron has done over the last couple of years. And as Ron will talk about again, when he does his report, expenses are up too. And you can see that in fiscal year 22, that your expenses were up over the previous year. So we got a pretty modest, pretty conservative projection for fiscal year 23. It would still have Ron covering about 32% of the debt payment, which is consistent through the next few years. And again, anytime the golf course contributes anything to the debt payment, which is an obligation that the city would have regardless, that's a great argument for the golf course operating. So are there any questions about either the fiscal year 22 review or the budget for 23 or our extended financial projection?
I would make one comment, Ted, and I know that we've discussed it and we've increased what our projected revenues are for this upcoming fiscal year, and it was increased about $100,000, and I think that's still the conservative number, and I think we'll achieve that without a problem. So very bullish on going forward. Our first 2 months of July and August of the new fiscal year, we're way ahead, not way ahead, but we're significantly ahead of last year's numbers. So very bullish on the golf course, not only for the next fiscal year, but years to come.
Yeah.
So.
You need a motion to approve those reports?
No, we don't, man.
Okay.
I think we're okay just for informational purposes. So we'll go on to, if everybody's prepared to, no more questions about the financials, we'll go on to the operational review. And I'll turn it over to Ron.
Okay. I did include a fiscal report for the year end for 21-22 fiscal year. Just some snapshots. Our green fees were around $64,000 over our budgeted number. Cart rental was $48,000 over a budgeted number. Pro shop $37,000 over budget. Memberships almost $20,000, and range almost $15,000 over in revenue. So again, revenues were up. I do, like I'd mentioned, I'm bullish on going forward on what I feel like we're able to achieve. And I'm very confident in the fact that we'll make budget and exceed budget without a problem. You did mention, Ted, and very valid, expenses were up. It's been 22 years since we've built the new clubhouse. We've had some expenses start to pop up. We had to replace an air conditioning unit this last year. Just like everybody else in the world is dealing with, gas prices are up, which affects pesticides and fertilizers and gas to run the equipment. Those expenses are up. The labor expenses is up as well. Everyone's dealing with those things right now. So so we've had some increases in expenses. I won't get into the weeds too much, but that's kind of just a quick synopsis of what expenses we've had to what challenges we've had with the expenses. So yes, they are. The expenses have also reflected up on the revenues as well, but we're still doing quite well. So again, very confident and bullish on going forward. I feel like the golf course is going to continue to thrive. Binder Park's a gem of a facility. I'm biased, of course. We've had a couple of golf courses in Calhoun County that have closed down. And it does bring more revenue to us, but it's also shows that, it puts a little onus on us that having a beautiful facility in Calhoun County and Battle Creek, that we're able to provide that great experience of recreation at our facility. The golf course is in incredibly good shape. Ryan does such a great job. And he apologizes for not being able to be here today. He's spraying fairways and greens today, but so very proud of what we have, very bullish on what I think going forward for the next, who knows, 10 years, maybe, who knows what will happen in the future, but very happy with what's going on at the golf course.
Did you pick up any leagues because of those closings?
We picked up one league and we had a new league from actually a bunch of young guys from Harper Creek and Marshall area, just a terrific league on Tuesday night. So we've picked up some new leagues. Sometimes we just didn't have space in the right days at some of those leagues that wanted to come our way. But yeah, we have picked up more league revenue. Our golf outings are back in full force. Just a quick story. We had a group of guys that are out at the golf course, 9 o'clock shotgun this morning. There were about 60 players. Dennis Duval, JC Coleman was from Marshall, Ed Ballman, that group of guys. They have a little memorial that they are doing today. And they all choose, they've been doing this for a few years, 60 guys, they all throw in $20 a piece and donate it to our junior golf academy. So it just helps that program continue to thrive. And I won't get in too much into that today, but that program's just kicking butt. They were doing really well.
Hearing if anyone's going to buy Oak Lawn Hills, or is that not?
I actually ran into Rick Pache yesterday, and then also Rusty Adkins, who they played out of Oakland, and they haven't heard anything. You drive by it, and it's just to see the tall grass and the overgrown property. I'm not really sure what their plans are going forward.
Mhm.
So, and the other golf course that closed was Tomac Woods, which you can see from the highway. They've clear cut all the trees, and that golf course is now going to be a solar farm. So, yeah, heard rumors about Oakland Hills being the same type of thing, but I haven't heard it for sure.
It's close to the line.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that kind of just my quick synopsis of what's going on at the golf course and kind of where I think we're headed.
So
Thank you.
you're guaranteeing us 10 more years.
10 more years. I want to be around for maybe a couple, but I'll be around in spirit.
Yeah, I wanted to share too, Commissioner Lance, and unfortunately, he was not able to join us last minute, but he wanted to send along his compliments to you, Ron, and the team at the golf course. Apparently you participated in a couple of fundraisers out there, so the course looked beautiful. Everything seemed to be going very well out there, so appreciate the effort there. And it's reflected financially here.
Yes, thanks, Ted. Appreciate it.
Ron, anything else you wanted to add for our operational review?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I did mention a minute ago about our junior golf academy, which is thriving. Tony Evans runs that facility and just continues to grow it. And we see it in the amount of kids that show up, like the compliments. Ed Bauman this morning told me how much his grandkids loved being there this year and had a great time. We have a couple of PGA Junior League teams that we create every year. If you want to compare golf to baseball, they're like little baseball teams, and we compete with other golf courses in the area, Battle Creek Country Club, and then we also had in my notes the PGA Junior League state finals for the west side of the state, which, being involved in all of those programs, that event there brought us $7,500 in additional revenue. So it's great to be involved and see the young people grow up and tell you 30 years later that I gave them junior golf lessons. It makes you feel old, but yeah, it's really cool to see the kids come around. So, yeah.
But I know when we talking about, a few years back, when we were struggling a little bit financially with golf in general, that, there was an issue of trying to draw young people into the game, and it just wasn't happening. But I hate to say a pandemic was good for the golf course, but on some level it has been, right? And we are seeing some younger people come back to the game.
It's been quite encouraging, just like the golf league that I mentioned. All those guys are in that. They call themselves the Battle Creatures. Everyone except for one guy's dad plays in the league. Everyone's 35 and under, so it's really cool to see all these younger folks, because it was worrisome a few years ago that you were seeing the golf population getting older, but you didn't see that backfill of young people. So it's been very encouraging to see. It's been some education. The younger folks like to come out. They like to play 2-man scrambles, and they like to play in a group of 6. And we just, we'd have to explain to them and educate them that, foursome's the maximum group that we allow, and it's a continual education, but they're good kids.
Yeah, great. Okay, we'll move on to member comments. Any comments from members? I would just say the next steps, typically we'd summarize this report and just share it with the commission so they get an overview of what happened over the course of the last year or so. So that's it. If we don't have any more member comments, then we'll consider this meeting adjourned.
Awesome.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks for the time.
I gotta tell